Story 1. I am not a writer. I don't have a degree. I don't have a Substack. And I definitely don't have a book deal. I'm just a person who went somewhere I shouldn't have gone, and I lost someone I care about. If you came here for flowery metaphors and clever twists, you won't find them. I'm just going to tell you why my life has gone to shit. If you live anywhere near the northeast coast, and you've ever thought about visiting Corvus Vale for urbex content, or just for a moody seaside getaway, don't. That's the short version. The long version is why I'm posting. I film abandoned places. It started as weekend therapy after a rough patch and turned into a small channel where I climb over fences, whisper "oh my god" at peeling wallpaper and pretend I know anything about history. I've crawled through burnt-out terraces and drained leisure centres. I've stood on the stage of a murdery-looking social club with a torch between my teeth because I couldn't be bothered to get my tripod. I'm not scared easily, I thought. This one started, like most of them, with a message. A guy I knew from an urbex Facebook group had posted a blurry photo of a lighthouse out in the fog. Someone had written in the comments, "That's in my town, just don't," which meant, to people like me, please go and make a video. I'd heard of Corvus Vale, but mostly as a joke. A smallish town dropped into the middle of nowhere. I think it used to be a fishing town. There's a dock, but it just houses flashy speedboats from men going through some sort of midlife crisis now. There's a crescent of grey pebble beach, good for sea glass collecting, a few streets of random shops and a really nice chip van. It seems very vanilla on the outside, although I have heard it hosts a good anime convention. The woods curl behind the whole town like a sleeping animal, essentially blocking it in. There's one road in and out, making the whole place kind claustrophobic, or cozy, depending on how you look at it. You couldn't pay me to go in those woods. They have their own creepy stories floating about. People say it's pretty in summer if the sun hits right, but every time I've looked it up, it's looked like November. Anyway, there's a bit of lore about the lighthouse. I didn't take it seriously then. I take it seriously now. The story goes that years ago, the harbour master was in debt to something in the sea. People say he made a bargain. He'd lure workers with decent pay and benefits to keep the light going. People that wouldn't be missed. Drifters, young lads with no family, women who couldn't say exactly where they were going next. It wasn't a normal job. It's rumoured that once you went out there, you didn't come back off. There's no actual proof, obviously. Apparently this guy was bound to pay tribute, and the tribute was people. That's what they say. I know that sounds like a campfire tale. I would have laughed too. Actually, I did laugh, a little, when I told Sam. Sam is my best friend and my worst influence. She moved back up north last year and started coming out with me on my adventures to get out of the house. She's the kind of person who can chat to a stranger like they're already mates, which is useful and also terrifying to watch. If I'm the torch, she's the big stupid grin reflected in the glass. We are polar opposites, and it works great. Worked. We'd both had a terrible week and we wanted to get away. Corvus Vale, I said, scrolling through photos on my phone as we sat in a Tesco car park, sharing a meal deal like teenage gremlins. We can get away for a bit, do a video, and I take you to that chip van because nothing beats a Jet 2 holiday, she interrupted in her best advert voice, smirking at me from behind her sandwich. Shut up, dickhead, I told her. We cracked up. You had to be there. We set off the next morning, early enough that the roads were empty. The hedgerows were still white with dew. Clouds like damp cotton hung over fields that looked almost foreign without people in them. The last bit of the drive took us through a narrow lane that didn't seem legal for cars. Then the trees opened and the sea was suddenly there, a long, low line that made my stomach drop in a good way. Corvus Vale didn't look like a real place at first. The town itself is wrapped into a neat little semicircle, the dense woods pressed in close, like they grew tired of standing back and decided to lean in. I counted 3 chip shops, 2 pubs, a charity shop with a single wedding dress in the window, and a post office that had handwritten opening times taped to the door. The woods behind it are, I don't know how to explain it. I remember thinking it was strange that you couldn't see far into them. The trunks were close together, and even though it wasn't summer, the branches knitted like fingers. But if you maneuvered your head just right, you could see a building in there. I saw a peak of a chimney poking out the top of some of the trees. It must be massive. I'm not going to talk about the stories people tell about those woods, because that wasn't why we were there. It's only to say the place has a way of making you feel watched, even in daylight. The lighthouse is set on a narrow, rocky outcrop a little way from the harbour, just far enough that you can't walk to it unless the tide is weirdly low and you're into dying. There's no public ferry. The path that once ran along the rocks is busted in 3 places and signed off with rusted council notice danger boards that look like they're part of the scenery now. The only sensible way is over the water. It took us a minute to figure out how to ask about a boat without saying we were idiots. We strategically asked about the place in 2 shops before going to the harbour. An old woman in a knit hat told us nobody went out there anymore. Too much bother, she said, and then she said the tide breathes funny out here. I didn't ask what that meant. Another guy in a hoodie shook his head and told us, the light's dead, love, which, obviously. We went down to where the boats were tied up. The harbour is a curved arm of concrete, maybe 50 yards long, with low steps that threaten to break your legs if you don't concentrate. There were a few little boats knocked gently against tyres. Most of them were clearly used every day. Sam found our man, she always does. He was in his 60s with a face that had been tightened by wind, not surgery, and hands that looked carved from driftwood. There was a tobacco smell around him that made me think of my granddad. He was easing a length of rope into a coil when Sam walked up and said, "Hiya." Stupid question. Do you ever lend out your boat for filming? He gave us a look that went from amused to suspicious in about a second. Depends who's asking, he said. We're making a documentary, I said quickly. I make videos about the coast. We wanted to get some footage of the coastline, just the coastline, the rocks. I've got a GoPro and a couple of vlogging bits. It would be like an hour. We're happy to pay. Do you know how to sail a boat? He asked flat. Yes, I lied. Well, not a complete lie. I'd done a weekend course on the Tyne once when I was 14 for my Duke of Edinburgh award. It was mostly about not hitting things and what to do if you do hit things. I'd never done it in the sea, and definitely not here. 50 pounds, Sam blurted out. I looked at her with wide eyes that clearly said, "What the fuck?" She just smiled at me. He squinted past us at the water like it was going to answer for us. "The tide's funny out here," he said, "and the fog breathes in and out like it forgets itself. You want to be off the water when it turns. You've got, 2 hours tops? You'll get into bother after that." Sam did the thing where she tilts her head and smiles. "We'll be careful. Promise." He hesitated. I could see him weighing up the effort of arguing versus the effort of making sure we didn't kill ourselves. 60, I said, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them. Sam raised her eyebrow and pulled out a wad of folded cash from the little pocket in her jacket and handed it over like we'd planned it. "And your name?" she asked. "Martin," he said. He took the notes and tucked it into his wallet without counting it, which made me like him. He stepped into the small motorboat at the edge of the harbour and showed me where things were. Throttle, choke, pull start, fuel shut off, spare tank, kill cord. He repeated 3 times that we should be back before the tide turned proper. I nodded like a kid getting the keys for the first time. He asked again if I knew what I was doing. I said yes again. I don't think he believed me, but the decision was made. He pushed us off with the heel of his hand, and we bobbed like a duckling that had fallen out of formation. We puttered out, me gripping the tiller harder than necessary, Sam sitting on the bow with her phone poised like a news reporter, the GoPro clamped to a pole so we looked more professional than we were. The cold came up through the floor of the boat and into my bones in a way I didn't expect. "That was easier than I thought it was gonna be," she giggled. "Remind me again," as she started, raising her voice over the revving engine. "Hair whipping." "What?" "We live 34 miles inland," she said. "Why did you learn to sail a boat?" "In case I ever needed to dispose of a body," I said, deadpan. She snorted. "You watch too much Dexter." "Probably." I tried to focus on the feel of the water. Rivers are straightforward. They push you one way. The sea is like being in a crowded room with 100 people moving in different directions. You think you're still, and then you look up, and the horizon has shifted. Out past the mouth of the harbour, the fog changed from a light breath to a wall. It rolled in low, in sheets, and then in ropes. I could see the lighthouse sometimes, then I couldn't. When I could see it, it was a simple white column with a red cap. From far away it looked almost clean. Up close it looked like a long bruise. We slowed as we neared the rocks. There's a small jut of stone that rises like a knuckle below the lighthouse, and on that there's what's left of a dock, 3 posts, 1 ladder, and a grey plank that had seen better days a century ago. I eased us in on the shore side to keep us out of the worst chop. Sam hopped across like she'd done it all her life. I followed, tying us up with a loop that would have made my old instructor squint. We had, as Martin said, about 2 hours to get this done. I kept that in my head like a timer. Sam had the same idea. "We get our shots," she said, "and we don't be stupid." "See?" "That's my line," I said. The lighthouse door was unlocked. That surprised me, though I don't know why. There was a heavy metal latch, rusted to an ugly orange, but it wasn't engaged. The door itself weighed more than it looked. It had that damp, swollen feeling like an old paperback that someone dropped in the bath and dried on a radiator. I'd brought 2 torches, one for me, one for Sam. We knew there wasn't going to be power. We clicked them on, and the beams made little cones through the fog that had somehow crept in. The ground floor was a round room with flaking paint and a metal staircase that spiraled up the inside wall like a rib cage. There were hooks where coats had once hung, and a metal locker with a warped door that wouldn't close. Someone had scrawled "Keep Out" on the inside of the door in marker, which made me roll my eyes. We did the usual. Close-ups, slow walking, me talking to camera in a whisper like somebody could catch us and tell us off, which is always silly when the person who would tell you off has been dead for 30 years. Then we climbed. "This is the watch room," I announced to the camera, panning the camera around the room. The ceiling was lower, and a little half window looked out over nothing. The glass was long smashed, and a chilly gust of wind caught me off guard. There was a bed with a narrow metal frame, bolted like everything else, with a thin mattress on it. Somebody had stacked the cushions from the armchair on it, as if weight could make it comfortable, the way you do when you don't have a proper topper. Sam, of course, flopped down on it because she has no self-preservation around textiles. The mattress let out a groan, and the cushions released a plume of dust into the beam of my torch, like a ghost finishing a magic trick. Sam coughed so hard she squeaked. "Gross," she said, half laughing, waving a hand in front of her face. The dust made her eyes water. "Fuck's sake, Sam, I've got asthma," I told her with an exaggerated wheeze, dragging her by her sleeve. There were hooks on the wall loaded with thick woolen coats and waterproofs, and a shelf with an old coffee thermos on it. I thought about the person who had washed that thermos each morning by the little sink, looking out at the same patch of sea until they couldn't tell you what day it was. There's a kind of life that slowly erases you. That's what this room felt like. "I wonder why they didn't take their stuff," I whispered to no one in particular. "'Cause they all died here, didn't they?" Sam said, nodding her head toward the camera, spelling out, "Get into fucking character" with her eyes. We climbed again. Metal steps, each one ringing a little underfoot, the sound dented by the fog that seemed to press through cracks you couldn't see. At the top, in the lantern room, the glass was fogged on the inside. That felt wrong. I wiped a circle and smeared it, which just made it look worse. The lantern itself was there, the big lens a dead eye. It felt like a museum where the signs had fallen down. I could hear, now and then, a noise like a sigh running along the rail outside. We found a notebook. It had been torn up, most of it, pages ripped, others stuck together with damp and age. We shouldn't have been able to read anything, but there was a blotch, a stain that had soaked through pages and made a brown halo, and in the middle of it there was one word left, faint as if it had given up fighting the rest of the ink. "Closer." "Spooky," Sam said, leaning her chin on my shoulder. "That could mean anything." I checked the time. We had, by my mental math, 20 minutes before I wanted to be back on the boat, which would put us back at the harbour with a smug amount of safety to spare. We did a few last shots of the lantern room, the long, slow pans that make people comment atmospheric and chills below the video. I filmed the broken gauge. I filmed the little brass nameplate that had been polished so much in its life that the letters were soft. "All right, let's go," I said. We went down the stairs, our torches wobbling, our feet trying not to slip on edges that had been worn to a shine. I reached the ground floor door and put my hand on the latch. I was already rehearsing how I'd wave at Martin and say, "You were right," and feel like a responsible adult. I pulled the door open and it was night. I don't mean it was darker than it should have been. I don't mean clouds covered the sun and the fog made it seem late. I mean outside the door was black, like somebody had gone behind the sky and switched it to the other setting. The fog wasn't white anymore. It was grey on black, like smoke above coal. The hairs on my arms prickled so hard it hurt. We weren't that long," I said, like time would be convinced if I said it firmly. The cold came in through the door like a living thing. I shut it. My hand shook enough that the latch clicked weirdly. Sam made a face that was halfway between "this is funny" and "this is stupid." "Okay," she said, "that's a problem." We both checked our phones. No bars, not even a flicker. I moved mine around like a divining rod for a second, then felt ridiculous and put it away. I could taste the fog now. It tasted like old pennies and something sweet that made my tongue curl. It got into my clothes. My torch felt like a candle in a football stadium. It's fine, Sam said, voice too bright. She does that. She goes school teacher when she's scared. We'll just wait. Sleep a bit. Go back at first light. It's not like the boat will float away. We tied it. I looked at the door again like something in it would change. Martin said the tide turns funny, I said. He said we'd get into bother. We'll not get into bother. We are safe in here, she said. And I hated that she sounded like she was humoring a child, but I needed it. Let's go back up. It's less drafty. We went back up to the lantern room, hoping to any god the guy that lent us the boat would send someone looking. The lighthouse creaked. That's the only word. It creaked like a tree in a gale, and like an old man getting up from a chair. The sounds came from different places each time, sometimes above us, sometimes below. Once it came from the outside rail, and my mouth went dry so fast I almost gagged. Maybe there's a foghorn, Sam said, poking at a lever on the wall near the stairs. If we can get it going, someone might hear. Don't, I said, but I said it too late. She pulled the lever like she'd been waiting her whole life for a dramatic moment. There was a heartbeat of silence, like a sucked breath. The horn sounded. It wasn't a modern sound. It wasn't that neat low bellow you get now on ships that sounds like something designed on a computer. It was raw. It was a brass instrument being strangled by the sea. It tore itself out of the lighthouse and into the fog, and the fog swallowed it and hurled it back at us from everywhere. It made my teeth hurt. It felt like someone had pressed an invisible hand to the back of my head and pushed. It echoed off nothing and everything. It didn't just ring in the air. It went through us. We clutched each other without looking like children who don't want to admit they're scared. Okay, Sam said, over the last shuddering tail of the sound. Maybe don't do that again. Then the light came on. I didn't know it could. The lantern roared to life. The beam hit the fog and made a white world that moved, and then it swung. It swung like it had always swung, in a long, patient sweep, and with each pass the fog was cut into layers that made shapes. Shapes. I wish I didn't write that. I wish I could say I was imagining things, but the light made figures in the mist. Not silhouettes you could explain away as rocks or sea spray. They moved wrong and then too right, like people who'd forgotten how to be bodies and were relearning in front of us. With each pass of the light, they crept closer, jittering and jarring, limbs moving all wrong. Sam swore softly. Shit, turn it off, she said frantically, searching for a switch, a knob, a lever, anything. We tried the same lever she'd pulled for the horn. The horn stayed quiet, thank God, but the light kept on, unbothered. We tried another lever, and a handwheel that felt like it was welded to the past. The light ignored us. I could feel the heat of it against my face, and it made the fog sweat. We scrambled down again to the living floor, where the little window sat like an eye that had been punched. There was a white feather on the sill. It moved in the draft like a twitching finger. A bird landed on the sill. I swear to you, I know what a gull looks like. I know what a pigeon looks like. I know what a crow looks like. This was a crow, but not black. It was white. Not albino with red eyes. White like someone had dipped a crow in milk and set it to dry. It had a scar on its beak, a little roughness that made it look like it had been welding at some point and didn't much care for PPE. It looked in at us, cocked its head, and cawed once. That sound went through the lighthouse and into my spine. It was like the horn, but small. It echoed down the metal bones. It made the light sweep hitch, just a fraction. I hate that I'm writing this because I know how I sound, but the bird looked at me like it knew what was going to happen. It was aware. It fluffed its feathers, shook itself, and hopped to the side so it could watch the stairs. We both stood very still. There were footsteps below us, not the creaks and groans of old bolts shifting. Footsteps. A set of them, not hurrying, not dragging. They sounded like somebody who was used to the stairs and knew exactly where to put their feet. One step, pause, another step, slow, methodical. It's just the wind, Sam said very softly. I'm going to see if there's a manual kill on the light, like a breaker. There has to be. Don't, I said, but I couldn't make my mouth say anything sensible. I'd like to tell you I was brave, and I grabbed a thing, and I went with her. I didn't. My legs just stopped belonging to me. She grabbed a wrench from near the door, the kind you use to bully pipework. If I don't find anything, I'll just smack the shit out of it. Two, she said, trying to sound brave. She was shaking, but trying not to. She looked at me like she wanted me to be the sane one, and I failed her. Stay, she said. Call if you see anything. I nodded. Useless. She went to the stairs and went up. Her footsteps made their own rhythm, and for a few seconds it covered the other footsteps, and I felt better. Then hers faded as she went higher, and the other steps kept coming. I backed up toward the wall like you do in a horror film right before the thing happens. My torch trembled, the beam catching on flakes of paint and making them look like eyes. The white crow watched the stairs with more attention than I have ever given anything. It made a small noise in its throat. I've never heard a crow make a small noise before. I heard Sam above me, metal on metal noises, a swear, a clatter like a panel being opened. "Got it," she called, breathless. "I think there's a—" Her voice cut off. Not like someone pressed mute, like somebody put a hand over her mouth but through her voice. There was the sound of something struggling, a scuff. The footsteps below sped up. I ran up the stairs after Sam. I yelled her name. I yelled until my throat hurt. There was a sound like metal bending where metal shouldn't bend, and then there was a scream. It wasn't long. That's the thing that replays. It wasn't a cinematic long wail. It was a short, furious, scared sound. It was a human sound. "Sam!" I screamed, scrambling up the stairs on my hands as my legs were jelly. The light went out. I stopped dead. I couldn't. Fear overtook my body, and I froze. All sound muted. It felt like someone had pressed pause, and even the sound of the crashing waves ceased. I don't know how long I stood there. I think I said no a lot quietly, like you bargain with a pet that's about to be sick on your carpet. When I could make my legs work, I went up. I kept the torch pointed exactly where my feet were going, terrified it'd see something. Anything other than Sam. The lantern room was empty. The panel near the floor that had looked bolted shut was open now, and the inside of it smelled like hot dust. There was nothing to see. That should have been better. It wasn't. "Sam," I said, so quietly it would have been impossible for anyone to hear me. I moved the torch slowly across the floor. Nothing. She was gone. I don't remember much after that. I know I touched the lantern glass and it was cold, like it was never on. I remember checking the rails to see if she had gone over. I think I went back down after that. My memory has blanks in it that shouldn't be blanks. I remember the feel of the wrench in my hand because I picked it up, even though I didn't know what I thought I would do with it. I remember opening the door to the outside for 1 second, and the night hitting me like a door in my face. I remember closing it again. I remember opening the door again, and it wasn't night anymore. The fog was still there, but thinner. I went outside, and the boat was still tied where we left it. I untied it with hands that didn't feel like mine, and I climbed in, and I turned the engine over, and I went back. And I didn't look behind me because I couldn't make myself. Martin was there when I came back in. He was smoking. He looked at me, at my face, at the boat without Sam in it, at the time on his battered watch. "Where's your mate?" he asked, voice very neutral, the way nurses talk when they're trying to get you to say the thing before they go get a doctor. I opened my mouth and whatever I said wasn't useful. I think I said stairs 3 times. He put his cigarette out on the heel of his boot and helped me tie up like I'd never seen a rope before. He put a hand on my shoulder, and it was the first warm thing that had touched me in hours. "Come on," he said, and he took me to the harbour office that had a kettle and a beige phone. I told him everything. The night at the lighthouse, the figures, the footsteps, Sam. "You've been gone 46 minutes, Petal," he said with a sigh. "If I'd have known you were going to that damn lighthouse, I wouldn't have given you the boat."
See.
I wish I could tell you what happened next was heroic. I wish I could tell you there was a search that filled news bulletins for 3 days, and divers with little lights combed the rocks and found something that could be put in a box and named. I wish I could tell you there was a report with conclusions that felt like anything but paper. The harbour master in Corvus Vale is a different man than the one from the stories. He was kind to me. He took me seriously. He said he believed me. As he listened, he took quick, disapproving glances at Martin, like he was scolding him with his eyes. "I'm sorry this happened to you," he said. "I'll file a report, say she fell overboard." "What?" I exclaimed. "Weren't you listening? She didn't." "It doesn't matter," he said grimly. "Your friend isn't coming back. It's time you thought of yourself, and this is the only way you'll stay out of Beacon Point." "Beacon what?" "It doesn't matter. Listen, if it makes you feel a bit better, I'll go out myself. I'll have a look around the rocks and see if I can spot anything." "In the lighthouse." "No one's going in that lighthouse," he shot back. He sounded frightened. "Then I'll come back, and we can work on something to tell your own authorities when you go home." He said that like they were 2 different things, his world and ours. They didn't find Sam. Back home, they asked me to come to the station. I made a statement. I made 3 statements. I repeated the route we took. They asked the questions people ask when someone goes missing. Did she argue with you? Did she drink? Did she take anything? Does she swim? I wanted, at some point, to stand up and walk until my legs fell off. Instead, I signed my name on a line, and the paper took it like that meant anything. I want to tell you I was brave, that I sat there and spilled my guts about the missing time, the footsteps, the light, everything. But I didn't. I lied. I lied to save my own arse because I found out what he meant by beacon point. I didn't think anything of it then, but I do now. I think it was a threat. If I opened my mouth and started a proper investigation, he would have me committed, and to be honest, it wouldn't have been hard. Everything I've told you sound completely batshit crazy. So I did nothing. And nothing happened. I know what you want from me if you've read this far. You want the explanation. You want the thing that makes the fog make sense. You want the reason the light came on. You want the rational thing about old capacitors holding charge and currents and unseasonable weather patterns. You want me to say I saw a man, and he pushed her. You want me to say she slipped, and the sea took her like it takes people every year who aren't paying attention. I can give you some of that. She could have slipped. It is a real possibility. There were wet spots on the metal. She could have put her foot wrong in a place that forgives nobody. But the part I can't get away from is this. When the light came on, the fog moved like people, and somebody walked down those stairs who wasn't my friend. Here is the part I haven't told anyone in real life because I do want to be taken seriously, and I know this will make some people move me into the unhelpful file. 2 nights after I came home, I woke up because a horn sounded in my dream. It was the same sound, the strangled brass. I sat up in bed with my heart trying to push itself out through my throat. The room was dark. The window was open a crack because the heating makes me sweat. I got up and shut it, and as I did, something white flashed on the roof opposite. Just a bob, a bird taking off. I didn't see it clearly enough to say more. I'm not an expert. I'm not even a good storyteller. I'm just someone who went to make a silly video and came home without my friend. People will tell you the sea doesn't want anything, that it doesn't think. Maybe. The lighthouse did what it always did. It turned and it called. It brought things closer. It took what it was owed or what it believed it was owed, and we were there and we were easy. So if you're an urban explorer, please, please be smarter than me. Don't go out there, not to Corvus Vale, not to that lighthouse. And if you're reading this and you're from Corvus Vale and you know anything, I'm asking you, please, even if it's a stupid old story, even if it's just where to take flowers that will mean something, I'll drive back. I'll stand there and feel stupid, and I'll do it gladly. I will go back if someone tells me how to make it right. I'm not brave. I'm not a hero. I just want my friend. I don't know if posting this will help. Maybe someone will say, I know what happened. Maybe someone will tell me a version of events that lets me exhale. Maybe nothing. I want you to be careful out there. If you go to Corvus Vale for chips and a walk and you see the fog roll in where the woods kiss the town and the sea leans in like it's whispering, go home, don't be brave, don't be me. If you've got questions, I'll try to answer them. If you want to tell me I did everything wrong, you're probably right. If you want to tell me that I should have gone up those stairs and grabbed her and dragged her down, that you would have. I know. I tell myself that every night. The last thing I'll say is this. If you go to the harbour and you meet a man named Martin, be kind to him. He tried. He didn't have to lend us his boat. He didn't have to believe me. He did. I think he knows more than he says. I think he is doing the maths of his own life, like all of us, and I don't want the sum to crush him. I'm going to hit post now before I delete this in fear of being sectioned or some shit. If you're the kind of person who likes to put pins in maps, don't put one in Corvus Vale. Let it be a blank spot. Let it go back to being a photo you scroll past. Let the lights stay off. Let the fog keep what it took. If I hear anything, I'll update. If I don't, please remember her name. Sam Pencott. She was funny and she was kind. And she lay on a disgusting cushion pile bed without thinking because she wanted to make me laugh, and she did. I love you, Sam. I'm sorry. Story 2. I was 17 the summer we found the cave on my grandmother's property in eastern Kentucky. I have never told this story to anyone, not my wife, not a therapist, nobody. Sealing the cave after Grandma Edith passed should have helped, but it did not. What Chester and I saw down there has never let go of me. I was what you'd call the nerdy kid back then, thick glasses, skinny as a rail, the type who spent lunch periods in the library. Every summer my parents shipped me off to Grandma Edith's farmhouse in the foothills of the Appalachians. figuring the mountain air would be good for me. The house was everything a city kid like me thought was cool about the country. High ceilings, creaky wooden floors, wraparound porches, and dense forest in every direction. The nearest neighbor was Chester's family, and their place was nearly a mile down the dirt road. Past that, nothing but trees and hollers until you reached the county highway. Chester was a year younger than me, and he was everything I wasn't. He could fix engines, hunt, fish, and navigate the woods like he'd been born to it. Where I was pale and awkward, Chester was sun-darkened and confident. Where I worried about everything, Chester just did things. We'd become friends the summer before, mostly because we were the only kids for miles, and boredom breaks down barriers. He taught me to shoot his BB gun and which berries were safe to eat. I helped him with his summer reading and showed him how to use his family's ancient computer. "John, you worry too much," he'd say when I hesitated at creek crossings or complained about spider webs. "It's just the woods. Ain't nothing out here gonna hurt you." I wanted to believe him. Chester made the forest feel like his backyard, and his confidence was infectious. Around him, I felt braver than I actually was. That summer, we were both restless in the way teenagers get when the days are long and the possibilities seem endless. We'd already built a rope swing over the creek, explored every deer trail, even tried to build a tree house that collapsed before we got the roof on. We needed something new, something bigger. We just had no idea what we were about to find. We found it in the third week of July, during a brutal heat wave that made the air shimmer and even drove the birds into shade. Chester and I were wandering the property, desperate for something to break the monotony. "Man, there's got to be something we ain't explored yet," Chester said, wiping sweat from his forehead. We were on the ridge at the back of Grandma's land, where the trees were thick and the underbrush hadn't been touched in decades. "Maybe the creek again," I suggested, though we'd been there twice already that week. "Nah, that's boring. We need something new." Chester stopped and pointed. "What's that?" I squinted. Through the foliage I saw a darker shadow, something that didn't fit the natural pattern of trunks and branches. I squinted where he was pointing. Through the dense foliage, I could make out what looked like a darker shadow among the trees, something that didn't quite fit the natural pattern of trunks and branches. We shoved through brush, scratched by thorns and wrapped in spider webs. Chester led the way, while I followed and complained about the bugs. "Quit whining," he called. "You want to find something cool or not?" In the hillside we found a depression about 15 feet across, and at its center the mouth of a cave, half covered by a rusted iron grate. Time and weather had rusted most of it away, leaving gaps just big enough for nosy teenagers to squeeze through. "Holy crap," Chester breathed, the first time I'd ever heard him sound impressed. "John, look at this." I crept closer. The opening vanished into blackness, a cool breeze drifting out with the smell of damp earth and something I couldn't place. "Think it's an old mine?" I asked. Chester shook his head. "Nah, wrong kind of rock. Limestone country. It's a cave, a real cave." He was already kneeling at the gap, peering into the dark. "We should tell my grandmother," I said. "She'd just tell us to stay away." He grinned, the kind of grin that meant trouble. "Come on, just a quick look." "We don't have lights." "My phone does." I wanted to argue, but Chester was already squeezing through the gap. His movement echoed strangely inside. "Chester, wait up," I called. Being alone outside seemed worse than following. "Just for a minute," his voice came back, muffled and strange, "just to see what's here." I slipped through after him, scraping my shoulder on the rusted metal. The passage opened immediately into a chamber 10 feet high and twice as wide. Chester's phone light swept over smooth limestone carved by water through the ages. "This is so cool," Chester whispered, and his voice echoed back at us from deeper in the cave. The floor was mostly level, covered with a layer of dirt and small rocks that crunched under our feet. Chester played his light ahead, revealing that the cave continued back into the hillside, much further than either of us had expected. "Okay, we looked," I said. "Now let's go back and get real flashlights if we want to explore." But Chester was already moving deeper, his phone light bobbing as he walked. "Chester!" "Just a little further," he called back. "I want to see how far it goes." I followed. The alternative was standing alone in the cave mouth, and that wasn't happening. We made it 50 feet before Chester's phone died. The darkness swallowed us whole, the kind you never get in a city. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. "Chester?" My voice sounded small. "Right here. Don't panic." His hand grabbed my arm. "Stay close. We'll follow the wall back." We shuffled for 5 minutes along the wall, trying not to trip. When daylight finally appeared, we were both shaking, though neither admitted it. "That was awesome," Chester said, though I heard the relief in his voice. "It goes back really far," I said. "Yeah, we need real lights and rope. Explore it properly." I nodded, though something about the cave felt off. Maybe it was the darkness, or the way our voices echoed. "Tomorrow," Chester said, "we'll come back with supplies." As we walked back through the woods toward the house, I kept looking over my shoulder at the cave mouth behind us. Even with the afternoon sun filtering through the trees, that dark opening seemed to pull at my attention. I should have listened to that feeling, should have told Grandma Edith, or just found something else to occupy our time that summer. But I was 17, and Chester made everything seem like an adventure, even the things that should have scared us away. We came back the next morning loaded like explorers. Chester had his dad's heavy flashlight, a coil of rope, and glow sticks from his birthday. I brought a headlamp, extra batteries, chalk for marking our path, and a notebook to map it. "You sure like to be prepared," Chester said at the cave entrance. "Better than getting lost." He was already squeezing through the gap. "We won't get lost. We got lights this time." With real light, the cave felt different. What had seemed mysterious in the dim glow of Chester's phone now looked like a normal limestone cavern. Water had carved smooth channels into the walls, and the floor sloped gently down as we moved deeper. "This is way bigger than I thought," Chester said, sweeping his light around. Several passages branched off, each fading into darkness. We spent an hour exploring the obvious routes, marking chalk arrows and dropping glow sticks. Chester sketched a rough map while I called out measurements. "Left passage goes about 60 feet and dead ends," I said. "Right passage curves back and connects with the center, like a loop." The center passage drew us in. It ran straight back, sloping steadily down, and our lights couldn't find the end. "That's where we need to go," Chester said, his voice excited. 2 hours in, he made the observation that should have sent us back. "You notice anything weird about this place?" he asked, studying the walls. "What do you mean?" "No bats, no bugs, nothing." His light swept the ceiling and walls. "Every cave should have bats, at least. Spiders, crickets, something. But look, nothing." I stopped and looked. He was right. The place was sterile. No cobwebs, no droppings, no life. Even the puddles were clear and still, with none of the algae you'd expect. "Maybe it's too far from the entrance," I said. Chester shook his head. "Nah, caves are ecosystems. There should be something living here." We kept going. We were too caught up in the adventure to let a little oddity stop us. The cave was giving up its secrets, and we felt invincible. The center passage dropped 100 feet over 300 yards. Our chalk marks and glow sticks glowed faintly behind us. Then Chester spotted the elevated passage. "John, look up there." I followed his flashlight beam to where the wall rose to our right. About 15 feet up was another opening. Unlike the others, it was perfectly round, 4 feet across, with a steady current of air flowing out. "Feel that breeze?" Chester said, moving closer to the wall. I felt it, cool, mossy, damp, but with something else underneath, something I couldn't place. "We can't reach it," I said. "Not today, but with a ladder or rope." He was already planning our next trip. I stared at the dark hole, uneasy. The air was too cold, carrying scents that didn't belong in limestone. "I think we should head back," I said. "We've been down here a while." Chester checked his phone. "Yeah, past lunch. Your grandma's probably wondering." We followed our chalk arrows and glow sticks back to the surface, faster this time. Sunlight hit like a flood, and I had to squint against it. "Tomorrow we bring a ladder," Chester said. "Maybe we should tell someone where we're going," I suggested, "in case something happens." He gave me that look again, the one that said I worried too much. "Nothing's gonna happen. It's just a cave." But as we walked back through the woods, I kept thinking about that opening and the air flowing from it. The scent felt familiar, like something half remembered from a dream. That night I dreamed of deep places and moving air, and woke with the taste of moss in my mouth. Chester showed up the next morning with his dad's aluminum stepladder strapped to the four-wheeler, grinning like he had solved everything. "Borrowed it while Dad was at work," he said, wrestling it off. "He won't miss it for a few hours." The ladder was heavier than it looked, and hauling it through the woods was an expedition in itself. We stopped every 50 yards to rest and untangle it from branches. By the time we reached the cave, we were both sweating. "This better be worth it," I muttered, helping him force it through the grate. "Trust me, it will." Getting the ladder down the sloping passage was another challenge. It was awkward in the tight space, and my headlamp cast confusing shadows. But Chester was determined, and we finally got it against the wall. "Hold it steady," he said, climbing. I braced it while his light swept the opening above. At the top, he went quiet. "What do you see?" I called. "It goes back a long way," he said, muffled. He climbed down, and we switched places. The ladder felt shaky under me, but I reached the opening. His flashlight had shown the tunnel stretching back, but what struck me was the sound. Water, dripping, echoing as if from a much larger space. "You hear that?" I called. "Yeah, sounds like water, a lot of it." I climbed down, and we stared at each other in the glow of our lights. "Underground river," I said. "Or a lake, only one way to find out." The elevated passage was more open than I expected. We could walk upright, the walls smooth limestone worn by water. The smell grew stronger as we moved, and the air felt thicker, carrying scents that reminded me of things long dead. After 200 feet, the passage opened. I have spent years trying to find words for what we saw, and I still cannot do it justice. The cavern was vast, the size of a cathedral, with walls fading into darkness. In the center was a lake. The water was black and still, like a mirror reflecting nothing. Our lights reached only a few inches, and when Chester tossed in a pebble, the ripples died too quickly, as if the water swallowed them. "Jesus," Chester breathed, his voice echoing from the ceiling above. I swept my headlamp around the edges. The far shore was almost beyond reach, maybe 50 feet away. "How deep you think it is?" Chester asked. "I don't know." "Deep." He was already digging in his pack. "Let's find out." He cracked a glow stick, tied it to a rock with a rubber band, and tossed it in. The green light sank, and sank, and sank. It never reached bottom. The glow vanished into distance until the surface was black again, showing no trace of what we had dropped. "That's not possible," Chester said, his confidence gone. I stepped back from the edge. The lake felt alien, the air too still, the silence too complete. Even our voices seemed muffled, as if the water absorbed them. "We should go back," I said. But Chester was staring at the far shore, his light barely catching shapes in the dark. "There's something over there," he said, "on the other side." I looked. In the faint circle of light, I saw what might have been structures on the rock, regular shapes that did not look natural. "Chester, let's go back and think about this." "We need a boat," he said, ignoring me. "An inflatable raft. We could paddle over." The thought of being on that water clenched my stomach. "That's crazy. We don't even know how deep it is. What if we fall in?" "We won't. I'm a good swimmer." "In a lake that might not have a bottom." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw he felt it too. The sense we had found something that should not exist. But Chester never backed down from anything. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll think tonight and come back with a plan." As we left through the passage and down the ladder, I kept looking back. The darkness seemed deeper than it should, and I felt something in that water watching. That night I could not shake the image of the glow stick sinking into endless depths. In my dreams, I sank with it into darkness so complete I could not tell if my eyes were open or closed. Chester showed up the next afternoon with a small inflatable raft strapped to his four-wheeler, the kind meant for lazy rivers. He also had life jackets, waterproof flashlights, and a hand pump. "Where'd you get this?" I asked, though I already knew. "Borrowed from my cousin Jake. He won't miss it." I eyed the raft. It was 6 feet long, built for calm water, not underground lakes. "Chester, I don't think that's going to work." "It'll be fine. It's rated for 2 people. We're light." Despite my doubts, I helped him haul it to the cave. His enthusiasm was hard to resist, and I was curious about the far shore, but the image of that glow stick sinking into black water never left my mind. Launching took longer than we expected. The rocky shore wasn't ideal, and we had to clear stones for a spot. The whole time I was aware of the water beside us, still as obsidian and reflecting our lights. "You sure about this?" I asked. "It's just water. Worst case, we get wet." But it wasn't just the water, and we both knew it. The lake was unnaturally still. No lapping at the shore, no movement at all. Even when disturbed, the ripples died too fast, as if the water was heavier than it looked. Chester climbed in first with a flashlight. The raft barely dented the surface, as if it floated on something solid. "Come on," he said, steadying it. I climbed in reluctantly, paddle in hand. The moment we pushed off, I felt the lake take hold of us. It wasn't like floating, more like being suspended over an abyss. "Paddle," Chester said, shining his light ahead. The rowing was strange. The water gave almost no resistance, yet the raft crawled forward, slower than it should have. It was like paddling through oil, though the water looked and felt normal when I touched it. "This is taking forever," Chester muttered after what felt like 20 minutes. I looked back and my stomach dropped. The rocky ledge was much farther away than it should have been, barely visible in our glow. Ahead of us, the far shore seemed no closer than when we'd started. "Chester, something's not right about this. Just keep paddling. We're almost there." But we weren't. The harder we paddled, the less progress we made. The far shore stayed distant while the shore behind us kept receding. It was as if the lake stretched itself, bending distance in ways that defied sense. Then Chester's light touched the far side, and we both went quiet. "What the hell is that?" he whispered. "I don't know, but I don't like it." The structure was 30 feet across, ringed with strange stone pillars. The rock was darker than limestone, smooth and almost metallic. Carved channels ran toward the water, and in the center stood something like an altar, though it was built for no human shape I could imagine. "We need to get closer," Chester said, but without his usual confidence. "No, we need to go back now." I turned the raft, but he grabbed my arm. "Wait, look at the water." I followed his gaze. The water glowed faintly, as if light rose from something far below. The glow was subtle but unmistakable. The surface shifted, a slow bulge rising as though some unseen current was pushing up from the depths. "There's something down there," Chester said. "Something big." Then our gear failed. Chester's flashlight flickered and died. My headlamp dimmed despite fresh batteries. Even my watch froze at 3:47. "Chester, we're leaving. Now," I said, cracking a glow stick. He didn't argue. We paddled hard toward what we thought was shore, but the darkness pressed in and our failing lights showed almost nothing beyond the raft. Then we heard it. A sound from beneath us, deep and resonant, like rock and metal groaning under pressure. It rose from the depths and vibrated through the water and into our bones. Ripples spread across the surface and faded too quickly. The raft shuddered. "Paddle faster," Chester said, and for the first time I heard fear in his voice. The sound came again, closer. The water around us began to glow, the light moving upward as if something vast was rising. We paddled in silence, our failing lights barely cutting the dark. The shore seemed impossibly far, and with every stroke I was sure we would not make it. But somehow we did. The raft scraped the rocks just as my headlamp died. We dragged it out and collapsed on the cavern floor, shaking in the shine of our last glow stick. "We can't tell anyone," Chester said finally. "They'd think we were crazy." I nodded, though part of me wondered if we were. The whole thing felt like a nightmare. As we packed up, I made the mistake of looking back. The water was still again, but I was certain something in that blackness was looking at us. For 3 days I avoided the cave. I stayed close to the house, helped Grandma with chores, even started reading one of her old romance novels just to keep busy. But Chester would not let it go. He showed up with a restless energy I had never seen. "You can't just pretend it didn't happen," he said one Thursday morning on the porch. "We found something incredible." "We found something dangerous," I said. "Our lights failed. Chester, all of them, at the same time. So we bring backups, more batteries, better lights." I looked at him and realized what I had mistaken for confidence was obsession. He could not sit still. Dark circles under his eyes showed he was not sleeping. "I need to go back," he said, leaning forward. "Don't you want to know what it was?" "No, I don't." Chester stood and paced to the edge of the porch. "Fine, then I'll go alone." "You can't." "Watch me." I felt trapped between two choices. Let Chester go alone, or return to something I wanted to forget. The thought of him down there by himself was worse than my fear. "If I go with you," I said, "we go at dawn. We bring extra everything, and at the first sign of trouble, we leave. No arguments." Chester grinned. "Hollow. Deal." That afternoon we gathered supplies. Chester had found a larger raft, more stable than the first. Borrowed from my sister's boyfriend, we packed flashlights, batteries, glow sticks, rope, even a first aid kit. Looking back, it was an expedition, not an adventure. "One more thing," Chester said as we loaded the four-wheeler. "I want to actually reach the far shore this time. Get a closer look." Every instinct screamed no, but I had committed. And despite my fear, I was curious. The shapes we had seen haunted my dreams. I needed to know. The forest felt different on the way back, quieter. Even the birds were silent. We slipped through the grate and down to the lake, our equipment heavier with every step. The cavern was as we left it, vast and still. The water stretched into darkness, smooth as glass. Against every survival instinct, I helped him launch the boat. The crossing dragged, and with each stroke I was more certain we were making a mistake. But something was different about the far shore. "Are those lights?" I asked, squinting. Chester raised the binoculars and went still. "There's something over there." "What?" "On the far shore. I see movement. And you're right. There are lights. Not flashlights. Something else. Something that glows." I snatched the binoculars. In the distance, a faint blue-green glow flickered, like the bioluminescence in the water. "Chester, we're turning around right now," I said, handing them back. My voice was a hoarse whisper. He looked through them again and gasped. Chester had gone completely silent. His mouth moved, but no words came at first. Then, in a whisper that grew louder, he began repeating, "It comes out of the water. It goes into the water. It comes out of the water. It goes into the water." I shook him, but he wouldn't stop. His eyes were fixed on the far shore, wide and shining, as though he was watching something emerge that I couldn't yet see. That's when the water around us began to glow. The luminescence rose from the depths like we'd seen before, but this time it was brighter, more intense, and in that growing light, I could see the true scale of what lay beneath the water. It wasn't a lake at all. It wasn't a lake. It went down forever. An eye, a well, a portal, an abyss eternal and bottomless, vast and deep, alien light, forever and ever. I screamed. I know I screamed because my throat was raw afterward, but I couldn't hear the sound over the roar of blood in my ears. Chester was screaming too, or maybe laughing, I couldn't tell which. The eye blinked. The entire cavern shuddered as something the size of a mountain moved beneath us. Water that wasn't water displaced around us, and our tiny raft was suddenly riding waves that shouldn't exist in an underground space. This shook Chester out of his fugue. We both dug our paddles into the glowing surface, fighting against currents that felt more like muscle contractions than water flow. As we stumbled out of the boat onto the shore, I made the mistake of looking back. The eye was there, staring up at us through bottomless layers of water that should have blocked any light. And in that ancient gaze, I saw recognition. It saw us. It saw into us, and though us. Something in Chester's mind shattered. I could see it in his eyes. I grabbed him and dragged him down the tunnel. We abandoned the raft and ran for the passage, leaving our carefully gathered equipment scattered on the cavern floor. Up through the elevated passage, down the ladder we didn't even bother to retrieve, through the cave system toward the blessed light of day. We burst from the cave into afternoon sunlight that felt impossibly bright and clean. Chester collapsed immediately, retching onto the forest floor. I managed to stay upright long enough to drag him away from the cave entrance before my own legs gave out. Chester was never the same after that day. His laugh, the easy confidence that used to pull me along into trouble, all of it vanished. He hardly spoke, and when he did, it was whispers about water and eyes that never stopped watching. Before the summer was over, his parents sent him away to a hospital in the big city, someplace special, they said, though they never used the word I knew they meant. I never saw him again. At first I thought he'd come back the next summer, that we'd pick up where we left off like nothing had happened, but his absence became permanent, a hollow space I couldn't fill. I carried the weight of it alone, pretending normal life was still possible, while the memory pressed against me like the dark water under the hills. That was 10 years ago. I've been in therapy on and off ever since, cycling through doctors who nod sympathetically when I tell them about recurring nightmares of black water and watching eyes. They prescribe medications for anxiety and sleep disorders, but nothing stops the dreams completely. Chester wasn't as lucky. The last I heard, he was living on the streets, talking to things that weren't there and insisting that something was still watching him. When Grandma Edith passed a year ago and left me the house, the first thing I did was hire a contractor to seal the cave entrance with concrete and rebar. I told him it was a safety hazard. I paid him extra to use twice as much concrete as necessary and to never mention the job to anyone. Some doors, once opened, need to be closed forever. Late at night, I swear that sometimes I can still hear the sound of water moving far beneath the ground. Story 3. I don't believe in superstitions, at least I didn't, until I read about my own death. I came home after 4 long years in the US, finishing my master's degree. My family lives in a small, remote town in India, the kind of place where you'll see more cows than cars. The transition from city life to this quiet, almost timeless village was jarring. Everything was slower, simpler, but also quieter. too quiet sometimes. My parents tried to make me comfortable, but it wasn't easy. My father is respected in the village, not just for his wealth, but for his influence. I never cared about the wealth, never flaunted it, but people treated me with a mixture of fear and respect. I had noticed this behavior before, but never thought much about it. It was only after coming back, seeing it again with a city mind, that the unease began to creep in. When I asked my mother about it, she sighed and told me, because of your grandmother, she has powers. On certain days during the festival, she channels the deity and addresses the villagers' concerns. People obey her. I laughed. Possession, powers, ritualistic influence. I brushed it off as old-world superstition. Then she added something subtle. You could come to the temple with us, she said. Almost an invitation. Almost casual. It's better if you're there.
See.
I shook my head politely. I didn't want to go. I had no interest in temple rituals or village crowds. Her voice hardened just slightly. Then at least stay inside. Don't interact with anyone on the day of the festival. Just stay inside. I nodded, hiding my curiosity behind indifference, but the warning lingered in my mind. It made me wonder why she felt the need to insist. The festival day arrived. September rain and sunlight flickering behind grey clouds, a deceptive calm. The whole street smelled of wet earth and fresh flowers from the temple. My parents left for the temple, leaving me behind in the house. Before leaving, my grandmother handed me a small pouch. Inside was turmeric. Keep this close to you, she said. Her fingers were cold but firm, no matter what.
See.
I didn't think much of it. I slipped it into my pocket and went back to my room. The morning passed in routine distractions. I played PS5, watched gameplays and streams, and lost myself in the familiar hum of digital worlds. Occasionally, the pouch slipped from my pocket. I placed it carefully on the table, almost forgetting it entirely. Then came the first strange thing, a loud crash outside my window. My heart jumped. I ran over, expecting a branch, a stray animal, something simple. But the glass was shattered. No brick, no stone, nothing in sight. I shut the window calmly, collected the shards, and tried to shrug it off. My mind insisted on logic, but a subtle unease began to seep in. Through the broken window I saw them, children, laughing, jumping, building paper boats with pages torn from old newspapers. The rain soaked them, plastered hair to their foreheads, but their joy was pure and unrestrained. Something in me stirred. A memory of childhood, of playing in puddles, of simple delight. I couldn't resist. I grabbed an umbrella and went out to join them. The children squealed at my sudden appearance, pointing and laughing as I fumbled with the newspaper. I copied their movements, folding the pages into boats and letting them float into the puddles along the road. Their laughter was infectious, pulling something long buried out of me, a memory of childhood I hadn't realized I missed. The villagers looked on from afar but quickly turned away. Their faces held quiet, subtle awareness, not anger, not direct fear, not pity, but a glance that felt like they knew something I didn't. It was disconcerting, yet I continued. When I tore the next page, I froze. It was an obituary section. My eyes scanned the page lazily until they stopped. The photograph. It was me. I blinked hard. Once, twice. My own name didn't go away, neither did my face. Same face, same name, the date of death, today. For a moment, my world narrowed to that single piece of paper. Rain blurred the ink. The laughter around me faded, one sound at a time. The giggles first, then the splashes, then the whisper of wind itself. All that remained was the drum of my heartbeat. When I finally looked up, the bus stop was empty. The road was empty. Even the village itself seemed to be holding its breath. A faint ringing filled my ears, the kind that comes after a loud sound, except there had been none. Panic set in, heavy and physical. I clutched the newspaper, shoved it into my pocket, and ran. The rain felt heavier now, the ground slick beneath my feet. My breaths came out short and ragged as I reached the house, pushing the door open with trembling hands. As I bolted up the stairs, I thought, absurdly, that I'd made it, that I was safe. But the instant my foot hit the landing, something sliced deep into my heel. A shard of glass. I crashed to the floor, clutching my leg. The pain was immediate and blinding. Blood pooled fast, dark and sticky. I stared in disbelief. Hadn't I cleared all the shards? I had. I remembered sweeping every inch of that floor. But this one, this large, jagged piece, was gleaming right where I'd stepped. I crawled, dragging myself toward my room, half hopping, half pulling, leaving smears of red along the floorboards. I slammed the door shut behind me and slumped against it, heart pounding in my ears. The pain blurred everything, but my gaze locked on the table, the pouch. I don't know what made me reach for it. I tore it open. Turmeric spilled out in a golden cloud. My hands shook as I pressed it against the wound. The sting was unbearable, but I kept going until the bleeding slowed. I felt weak, trembling, and the urge to run to the kitchen to treat myself properly gnawed at me. But fear held me in place. I tried to stand and reach for my phone, but my leg refused to cooperate. My body felt heavy and tired, every movement an effort. Then it was all a blur. The distant roar of our family car pulling into the driveway, hands lifting me into the back seat, sirens, flashing lights, the sterile chaos of the emergency ward, pain, exhaustion, confusion, darkness. When I came to, I was bandaged, lying in a hospital bed. The newspaper in my pocket, the one that had shaken me to the core, was gone. I couldn't find it, no matter how hard I searched. It was as if it had never existed. I don't know what was real. The children, the street, the obituary, the shard of glass, the turmeric. Was it all a warning? A vision? A trick of the mind? I only know this. I cannot leave my home until I find that newspaper page, until I know what it meant. Until then, I stay inside, locked doors, cautious steps, the world reduced to my room, my thoughts, and the lingering, inexplicable terror of that day. Superstition or not, I am not foolish enough to challenge death again.